Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all listeners. And thank you to Chaim Noll for joining us today from Israel. We actually had a call organized for yesterday, but unfortunately, Chaim could not take part in it because his area was bombarded with rockets from Yemen. I'm really happy to see you all in one piece, and thank you.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm also happy to be still in one piece. It's going on for a long time that we are under threat here, and we can be happy that we have endured all that, and um, that all in all, the war is, I think, the main actions are over so far. The Hamas is silenced and the Hezbollah is silenced for now. But we have the problem now with the Houthi from Yemen who try to hit Tel Aviv and also the southern region um, where the airports of the Air Force with the attack jets are situated. So that's why we sometimes have still the red light going. And the problem of that war in general is that there are, if you want, endless groups who can start it anew. So as long as the head of the snake is active as the center of all these activities in Tehran is working, they will always find some group in some of the desperate poor countries here around to pay for. They have a lot of money still. So we can only hope that the American policy in the upcoming administration will change the attitude towards Iran and either allow Israel to attack Iran directly, as many people here demand, many military people, for instance, former General Staff, Chief of General Staff Gantz, Benny Gantz, whom I gave my vote at the last election. He's also the second largest party here. So he demands to attack Iran directly to bring them to the point that they stop inspiring these Houthi in Yemen to attack us. So, but the problem is when the Houthi don't do it, there will be another group. So we have to solve the problem with Iran. All these groups are only proxies.
Yeah, because Iran is financing the Houthi in Yemen, but as well as Hezbollah in South Lebanon. And this also in part thanks to the release of I don't know, $7-8 billion or so, even more, big chunk of money that was frozen in accounts worldwide, and the current administration in the U.S. gave the green light. Obama as well.
Obama did, yeah. I think it was really Obama. Obama did already, but this is not all. The main problem is the treaty with China they have started in 2021, just after Trump lost the election and Biden came into power. Trump said in an interview that he could thwart that treaty and with threatening China with sanctions. China is much dependent on exports to the United States, so they are vulnerable, of course. And he said in that interview, I don't know whether it's true, but it's what he said, that he could block that treaty. But what speaks in favor of him is that really some weeks after the election in the United States, after the new president came into office in March already. In March 2021, China and Iran signed the treaty, and that gives China the crude oil from Iran for 20 years. They send a lot of crude oil to China and get paid for it with altogether $200 billion, so that you can easily calculate what they get annually, and it brought them into the situation that they can afford to finance all these proxies here around in Iran, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Gaza, also threaten governments. For instance, the government in Jordan is weak at the moment. We have seen how quickly such a regime can collapse in Syria when there are rebel groups paid and supported by other countries will get into action, and the same can happen in Jordan, for instance, where the Muslim Brothers are a real threat to the monarchy. And so the entire region is destabilized by this politics of Iran to buy these militias who offer. It's like a market where the militias offer their services to those who pay. In Syria, it was Turkey paying for these rebel groups, and the United States pay for the Kurds. They're also occupying a part of the territory there. So it's there is no stable situation at the moment, and no hope for it. So it will go on for years that we have to live with threats from those groups. But the main problem is Iran. Iran gives the money, and if we can succeed to deter them or something, that they stop that. If not, it will go on and on. So that's the problem.
Well, but now with the collapse of Syria, we are also seeing the emerging dangerous politics and influence of Turkey in the area, especially from recent speeches from their President Erdogan, who is talking about invading, going south with the army, restoring.
Yeah.
You know that recently said that he wants to have back Palestine, etc. It
Yeah.
was a few days ago speech, of course, of which the news doesn't report, on which you see what you are describing here, what we are talking here. It looks like a strange and complex political game of which the average citizen is not aware. I mean,
Right.
also,
Yeah.
on the other hand, I would say there is Iran with the military influence, there is the problem of Turkey, and there's the third issue, which is the huge investments of Qatari in the West to keep silence everything and to turn the table of history, because the average, as I said, the average citizen in Europe is absolutely disinformed in the worst possible way when it's not informed.
So we must put into account that we had a very weak and badly working American administration for the last 4 years. And a lot of those problems emerged because of that. I mean, Turkey, for instance, is a NATO member. And of course, the United States are capable to use some pressure against Turkey if they want, and also against other powers here in the region. Qatar, for instance, is much dependent on the United States. They have the fifth, they have American troops in their country, and they are threatened by Iran themselves and need the American troops. I think the headquarters of the of all the troops here in the Near East is based in Qatar, so that the United States had a lot of possibilities to influence these countries, but the Biden administration did not. So they let them all do, and the games were up, and so that was a problem that even Erdogan, who has a lot of problems himself with his weak economy at the moment and problems, internal problems, and an army that he has much diminished himself by bad politics, so, with purgations among the officer corps and so on, so that we don't really feel a threat from Erdogan himself. So he cannot start a war or something. He has no considerable air force at the moment, for instance. Only old machines. So he didn't get newer American machines because he bought a Russian air defense, and the Americans became angry about that. So he is out of the list of those countries who get F-35. So that he's not a real threat, but he can finance, and that's what he does, militias who destabilize the region, as these people in Syria did. And although we are all happy that Assad is done and had to leave the country, and it was really a terror regime and terrible for the people over there, but we don't know what these new people will do. So there are fundamentalists. That's what we know. It's interesting to see. It's difficult to understand what Erdogan wants. I think he wants to be a power player here in the region. These groups he supports, or the Turkish government supports, are rather anti-Iranian so far, because they are Sunni Muslims and Iran is Shiite. So both fundamentalists, so they don't even accept each other being Muslims. So far it goes. So we have to wait now what will happen in Syria. But altogether, we can say that the region is in turmoil still, and that stabilization is only possible if the Iran regime stops trying to start wars, as they did. They always are on the point that they want to start wars here around, and they do. They started also with Saudi Arabia, for instance, with the Houthi. The Houthi have also attacked Saudi Arabia. It's not only Israel threatened by them. And I think we have to deal with Iran directly somehow.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they are playing a geopolitic game on which
Yeah.
they are also pawns because of the global situation. But Iran at least is a little farther. I mean, there is Iraq in between Israel and Iran, and Turkey. I don't know. I do personally see Turkey a little more dangerous than we estimate, for several reasons. Turkey already destabilized the Nagorno-Karabakh area with its influence in Azerbaijan, where the puppet president, this joke president with his wife as prime minister or whatever, something, his main military consultant are Turks, and they are behind the invasion of Nagorno-Karabakh. They are very active in Libya, and of course, we all know the scandalous, the horrendous situation of North Cyprus. That it's not nobody cares about North Cyprus. That's it's again the media present that, the politic. It's you see. That's why one of my questions, and then we will go on your article that we wanted to discuss. But one of my main question is, don't you think that Israel is in this moment caught between the political, intellectual, and moral decline of the West and the resurgence of the Islamic world?
Of course, we are. So that's the situation, that we have to stand our ground here in this region, although we cannot really rely on support from the Western countries, especially not from Europe. Um, but for us, there is no alternative. So we have to defend ourselves. So we cannot, as the Europeans can, or think they can afford to try politics, to tolerate all that and so on. It's over here. We have tried that, and I think that the general atmosphere here in Israel is in favor of direct actions, military actions. So we know that other attempts are senseless. There is nothing to negotiate and nothing to talk about anymore. So we have to answer to violence with military actions. That's what everybody knows here. And of course, the war we have. Let's hope it's behind us now. The more than 1 year. That was exhausting, and we are all a little bit strained now and exhausted, also emotionally, from all the worrying about our children and so on. You feel it here in the country that people are really exhausted, but we stood our ground, and if they start anew, we will do it again. So we have no other possibility. And that's why whatever the politics of the Western countries is, we have to do what we have to do. So the time where Israel took so much was so, let's say, self-restrained and always consulting with the Europeans and so on is over. So we have to do here. We have our own law to follow. We can't follow the ideas of European governments anymore. It's a step of self-emancipation that was, in my eyes, it was due. So it was good for Israel to become emancipated from the always fearful European governments and do what we had to do.
Well, fearful or openly anti-Israel, to put it mildly, like the Irish government, for example. I mean, the speech of their president a few days ago.
Okay, yeah, it was very popular here in Israel that we stopped diplomatic relations with Ireland. I hear from young people that they don't go to that country anymore, so they don't travel to Ireland anymore. I don't know what the outcome will be, but that's some symbolic a step of the Israeli government to show that we are also ready to do that. And if a country is stubbornly hostile against Israel, as Ireland was, so then we take the risk and break the diplomatic relations, cut the embassy or whatever. I think that was a good idea.
You know what they said? They said that the Israeli embassy will be the Palestinian museum, which means it will remain empty. It will remain an empty building.
Yeah.
What do you want to put in there? Pictures of Arafat. I mean,
yeah.
It's a pity. It's a pity because the Irish people are great people. They are just under politics that it's I don't know. It's a scandal. It's one of the many scandals of our age where the politics doesn't represent the country.
No, with many countries. I think in Germany are not represented by the governments. It was also with the last German government that not really represented the German majority. And they will see now. The elections are soon. We will see what remains of those parties who did it. Of course, I think there will be many changes also in Europe. I'm quite sure. Many people are fed up with that politics, and they learn more and more that in confrontation with militant Islam, you cannot do what these parties did. Appeasement and so on is over, I think, for most of the European countries, and the population will show that at the next elections. That's my impression, also in
But
other countries.
the question why they did it remain open, and one of the things that one of the issues we have is that we haven't read Plato or Aristotle, would already mention the reason why the tyrant loves the foreign element in a society. But everything has been told, everything is in front of
Yeah.
our eyes, but we are diverted. And to that I want to go to the article you recently published on December 10 on the European Conservative, by the title "Does the West Need a Palestinian State?" That we are going to use for our talk. And you start in the article mentioning exactly Ireland, Spain, and or Norway for the recognition of a non-existent Palestinian state. But you are well aware that such a beginning, which is absolutely factual and related to history and facts, is absolutely impossible to be understood in large part of the academia, students, media. If you go to if you go to the in a BBC studio and you start but with the lines you started your well-written article, what do you think is going to be their reaction?
I don't know. I only know the reaction from Swiss readers. I published this article before in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, very well known and prestigious European daily newspaper, published in Zurich, in Switzerland. And I got during the first 24 hours more than 300 feedbacks, letters to the editors in the internet, and they had to put away some of them. 10 were so anti-Semitic that they had to remove them from the website. That they didn't like to see them there. But then it was interesting that of these 300, about the half was in favor of what I wrote, even adding arguments and points that I could mention in the limited space, so that I even had some profit from that, because I was invited from a German publishing house to write a book about it, and these readers gave me a lot of material I didn't even think about in the moment, so that I was very grateful. The readers, so about 50%, were much in favor of the article and supported my position. And this is new, I must tell you, that you have such a reaction in Europe. I was accustomed to much worse reactions over the years. So usually when you write things like that, when you, for instance, I write that the Palestinian state is out of discussion at the moment and doesn't make any sense, and will, as we have seen in Gaza, turn into a terrorist enterprise that will only be a new threat to the region and a new source of war and not of peace, as the official politics claim, that such a state would be the garant of peace in the region. So that is the opposite is true. And when you wrote this 5 years ago or 3 years ago, I think I would have gotten 90% negative comments. So I think that this reaction that I experienced in the forum, in the readers forum of Neue Zürcher Zeitung, shows that there is, at least in Switzerland, so But Switzerland is a very interesting and representative country for Europe. It's in the center of Europe and well connected around, and it's neutral politically. So when I must say, I was surprised about the positive reaction altogether. I would never have expected to get 50% confirmation by the readers.
Well, but you had to add that the Neue Zürcher Zeitung is a very, is a high, is a newspaper for people well informed with a high intelligence. You know, it's not the I don't know, the Bild Zeitung or the FAZ.
Oh, the Bild Zeitung is quite okay. What concerning Israel, it's the
Yeah, I
the
mean
best
readership.
German paper at this point.
I mean the readership level. The readership level
I don't
is
know. It's
high.
interesting when once you mention this, it's interesting that obviously the Bild Zeitung has no problems with its readers in their position regarding Israel. So I think it's not the lower classes, as you call them, or whatever the so-called elitists would call them. The problem is the left intelligentsia in these countries. They are staunchly anti-Israel, not the Bild Zeitung, not the readers of the Bild Zeitung. So the normal people in these countries, working people and so on, most of them understand quite well what is done here. So I think we should differentiate between those groups in Europe. I think that the so-called elitists, so the academia and so on, they are the problem.
Yeah,
They are the problem. They have worked up themselves into an anti-Israeli frenzy, so to speak, over the years. It's part of their anti-Western attitude. So they see their self confirmation and their identity in endless opposing a capitalist society and the West in general. And Israel is a symbol for that, for colonialism, for Western imperialism and whatever. And that's why they have chosen Israel as the target and the symbol of their anti-Western movement. But the normal people don't agree with that. They are quite happy with the country they live in. They don't wish a caliphate or something. So I think when you mentioned the Bild Zeitung, I wouldn't have had problems to publish that article in the Bild Zeitung, only because of the intellectual level. So the Bild Zeitung has another kind of articles that must be much shorter. Such a long article as I wrote that fills an entire page. He gave me an entire page for this, Mr. Breitenstein, the editor. The Bild Zeitung would never do. They make very short. I don't know whether I could have brought all these points in such a short. So the Bild Zeitung is not the real. But from the standpoint, from the what I say, the essentials, I think most of the readers of the Bild Zeitung would agree with that, but not of the intellectual, not of Spiegel or Süddeutsche Zeitung, where the intellectuals or the so-called and those who feel like that are the readers. They would never accept such a text.
I still remember that Günter Wallraff book about the Bild Zeitung, which made sense a few years ago. But yes,
Bild Zeitung has a bad reputation among intellectuals. And I mean, I don't want to talk about the methods they have with their, but they are very consequent, I must say, in their pro-Israeli position over the decades. I must say this year that there is barely a European newspaper so consequently in favor of Israel, and also in their reporting, in the way they their research and everything very accurate. So when you want to know anything about the real situation here, the Bild Zeitung is the most informative German newspaper in Germany.
So you are basically saying, and I do not, I'm not surprised by that, that the average reader in Germany is smarter and better educated than their elites and academics.
Yeah, they are not biased in that way. So I think the academics have taken a position. I don't know. It's difficult for them to retreat. We will see. I'm very interested to seeing what will happen during the next 4 years in the United States, whether all these full-mouthed people who supported the Palestinian protests on the campus and so on of prestigious universities, whether they will persist, whether they will endure all the 4 years. Trump will go into a complete other direction, and there is also possibilities of funding and a lot of possibilities the government has to influence that. And the last government was also weak and badly working in this point. They have allowed to happen all this. I'm very interested to see what will happen during the next 4 years. Whether we have whether all these peoples are heroes and will stand their ground also when there is pressure. It was easy in the Biden time,
But
but
they're
now
changing themselves in a way, but something that Trump said and has not been reported, and it's one of the most important things that he said or in years, is that all universities that will allow anti-Semitism on their campuses will lose accreditation. I hope that he will go through with this, because this is a very key important point, because if you touch them on the wallet, then they will become suddenly they'll become reasonable.
yeah,
And
I think he will, and he will be supported by a lot of Jewish sponsors. And we had already cases that huge donations were withdrawn from American universities by Jewish sponsors during the last half a year. There was an anonymous in alumnus of I think Columbia University who withdrew 240 millions of dollars he had intended to give the American university, and instead of that gave it to the Bar Ilan University in Ramat Gan in Israel. This huge sum. So that was a symbolic act, and I think there is a lot of Jewish sponsors at the end of their patience now. I mean, it was absurd to see the pictures of those protests where these campuses with buildings where was written the Jewish name of the sponsor on the face of the building, and in front of it the Palestinian flags. I mean, this cannot be the sense of the Jewish sponsoring of American universities, that they finance anti-Jewish and anti-Israel actions. And these actions in the American universities had one very good point, I must say. They have shown that demonstrated that anti-Israel movement leads into general anti-Semitism. I think before that, many American Jews have thought it's not my problem when they are against Israel. No, when they are against Israel, it's only the first step, and then it goes into general anti-Semitism, and they attack Jews on the campus, American Jews. And I think that's what they have demonstrated, and what many Jews in the United States, I hope, understood now, that anti-Israeli movements turn against them.
you I don't know any of these people, any of these accusers of Israel, who's at the end their reason is not anti-Semitic.
mm,
Recently came out a post, I mean, a Twitter
mm.
or X from Francesca Albanese, the one of the worst
Yeah,
anti-Semites.
yeah, she is. Yeah.
And
Mm,
somebody said, I mean, the post was about Israel eating people, the
yeah.
whole topic. And she said, oh, please don't blame all the people in Israel, only the part of Israel eats people. It's just like, it's insanity. It's absolute
Mm,
insanity. But, a
mm,
lot of decent people, I would
mm,
not limit this disgust for what's happening in campuses only to
mm,
Jewish people. A lot of decent people, reasonable
mm,
people
mm,
uh, with the sense, I mean, a sound
mm,
judgment. They are all disgusted by what they're
mm,
seeing,
mm, mm.
and
Yeah.
this is the good part. But the problem is that how far has the damage already been done? Because the terminology already, the whoever wants to put bullshit in the system, in the cultural system, doesn't
Mm,
care about the reality, the truth. They just repeat nonsense like genocide, like colonizers, this type of
mm,
words that we are forced to address even if they make no sense. So a huge damage has already been done. And when you think, I mean, if we
mm,
want to, I mean, of course, it displeases us, but the students, the Harvard students, the Columbia students, etc.,
mm,
they're going to be the next
mm,
managerial, the leading intellectual and I
mm,
mean, intellectual
mm.
quote unquote class of the United States and of many other countries, and this is a big problem.
Yeah, I think there is damage done already, and we have to wait the next years what really will happen. I think from let's say when I um, generalize experience from individual psychology to the society, a person who overstresses it's welcome, and a person who behaves in a way that others feel rather appalled and taken aback. So I think that these Palestinian demonstrators made a lot of mistakes. I think the entire war Hamas started was a big mistake. Look what how they stand now in the end. What is their situation here? They are done. Their
They still
weapons.
have the
And
hostages.
sorry,
They still have the hostages.
yeah, they have their hostages. But that's all. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
all what they can.
that's a lot.
Um, it's a lot,
You know this,
but they
right?
cannot send. Yeah, but they cannot send rockets anymore. For instance, yeah, it was much more than the hostages. The hostages is a very sad chapter that this has happened at all. I think we talked about it already, and I wrote about it that it is also it has to do with the Biden administration that it was possible to take so many people hostage. There is one hostage here going around at the moment, 18-year-old boy from Holland. He came. The family came from Holland. I think his name is Ophir Engel. He was freed in this first temporary truce. And he says, and that's really disturbing to learn, that he was taken hostage only at noon of that day of 7th of October. That means that from 6:30 in the morning until noon, there was no military reaction from Israel. So that was possible for them to take hostages also at noon on 7th October. And I start to think about, so who is responsible for that? That the Israeli army was blocked over many hours because there was no decision made whether we start war or not. And there is only one power in the world that can interfere in this decision here, and that's the White House. And the problem is that I guess so. When I think we talked about this already. When you take into account it was, or is it okay? No, it's okay. So when you take into account that it was about it took some time, I think, to bring Biden back to life at all, and to make him to bring the people who had to be consulted, American army and so on, together. It took some hours, obviously, for the White House to make a decision whether they would support a war Israel had to start here. And the point is that unfortunately, the Israeli government did not act on their own account, but waited for the decisions made in the White House. So in these hours, there were people taken hostage. I must say, it's a terrible thing. The fate of the hostages has much to do with Biden and his administration, who were incapable to react quickly. So they took hours to decide. There was so much in a anti-war politics, so it was so their doctrine that there shouldn't be a war at any cost here in the Near East, that Israel had to avoid any serious war with the Palestinians, with the Hamas. I mean, we had wars already, and they were all cut off. They were all stopped in the right moment. We had 2009, we had 2012, 2014, always the same procedure, that Israel started to react forcefully, and then it was blocked by the, as it is called, international community. But let's say it openly, that's 90% the United States. We are dependent on the delivery of ammunition and so on from the United States. Israel cannot stand such a war on several frontiers as we had. I think 7 different frontiers with incalculable attacks from all sides, and it's a question of material, and we need the weapons, so the ammunition and others, rockets and so on, from the United States. And that's why the government tried to make sure that the United States would support such a war. But it took the Biden administration many hours. That's to the point of the hostages. I cannot repeat that often enough. So that's it's a very bad, as Trump called it, a very sad story. It's really sad what happened on October 7th.
Why are you excluding entirely the strategic option? I mean, the army could not move immediately before gather intelligence about what was going on, because if you this is basic military strategy. You don't send your troops without knowing if that's an ambush, if that's what kind of situation, what is the strength of the enemy, and this type of things. This is also one consideration. Some people, for example, remarked that I think we had this discussion that the helicopter were coming from the north, which makes sense, because strategically you want to retreat the heavy machinery, the airplanes, helicopter, from the bases that are close to the attack, and use the military power coming from a distant base. So in the meanwhile, we'll cover.
Yes, but it's a very small territory here, and the distances do not justify hours of delay. So if it would have been 1 or 2 hours, I would agree with you. But it have been in the end 6 hours. No, that it's not. It wasn't only an Israeli problem here. There has really been someone else
But I saw the F-16
included.
being removed from the base, being carried.
I understand. Yeah, I agree with you. Of course, they had to. There is
Protect.
one. There's one interesting story. There were several high-ranked officers, generals, and others who went on their own account into the battlefield, so to speak. One of them got a telephone call from his son, who was in one of the kibbutzim, and learned that his grandchildren were endangered. They were retired generals, and he took his personal gun, his pistol, and took on his uniform. He wanted to be recognized as who he was. That was clever. It was risky, of course, because he would have been killed immediately or taken hostage if he would have the bad luck to meet overwhelming Hamas forces. But he is a very experienced man, and he managed to gather some 20 or 30 paratroopers and other troops who were alone without an officer there in the region, and really did heroic deeds on this day. He freed hostages, he helped injured people, his wife brought them by their private car into the next hospital, and so on. And he called on his way from Tel Aviv to the south, that takes, let's say, 2 hours. He called a lot of his former colleagues who are still in office, among them the chief of the Israel General Staff, and asked him what happened and do you react? Did you get an order to react, to do something? And the chief of the General Staff, of course, didn't answer that question because he couldn't say no. He didn't get order. And this was about 2 hours after, 2 or 3 hours after it happened. So the army did not get orders from the government to act. And that's the point where Netanyahu will be in real troubles at a certain point when when all these things will be under when there will be commissions to find out what really happened and so on. Now it's still war, and it has not really started. But that's the point where he has to take responsibility for that. He didn't give the army. It's well known from there is a computer in the Prime Minister's office that is noting down everything that happens, every telephone call and so on. And it's well known that he spent the first hours on October 7th telephoning with foreign politicians, not with the general staff. And that he only at 11 o'clock, 11:20, he arrived in Tel Aviv at the headquarters of the army. Let's say it takes 20 minutes by helicopter from Jerusalem. It's a small country. It's within 20 minutes he could have been there. So he let 4 hours pass when nothing happened. And I mean, this cannot be explained only by hesitance, or that the government here was hesitant. So there were influences from abroad, of course, who said until the last moment. And in this time, there were taken hostages. So the hostages is really a very bad point and a sad point, and we have to think about this for a long time. You know, Jews always think about their past and what they did wrong, and we still think every year about the military catastrophes we had in the year 70 and others when the temple in Jerusalem falls. So we have days of memorizing this, and I think this October 7th will be such a day that will go into Jewish history as a day of shame. Something happened here that should not have been happened, so that the army was blocked to act. it. And but that's only because you mentioned the hostages. All in all, then the reaction was very successful. The war is won. More than that, the situation has much changed in favor of Israel now here in the region at all. In general, also the Hezbollah was crushed more or less, so they don't send rockets anymore. Maybe there are still structures functioning. It's in this case it's more difficult because Lebanon is a sovereign state and Israel cannot act there as it can in Gaza, where the Hamas structures now are destroyed systematically one by one. The troops are still in the Gaza Strip and they will not move out so quickly because they have given the promise to the populace here that they will only move out after they have destroyed the entire Hamas structures so far. So, but this is on the best way to happen. The same in Lebanon. And then what we didn't foresee, also Assad collapsed and this cut off the Hezbollah. The Hezbollah is now, so to speak, disarmed because all the weapon deliveries went via Syria. And in the moment, Syria is the Assad regime has collapsed. It is there's a high probability that for a long time Hezbollah will not get weapons from Iran anymore via Syria, because the Hezbollah is one of the most hated groups among the Syrian rebels who have now taken power. Assad brought Hezbollah fighters to Syria to fight against the rebels. And of course, they were cruel as usual and so on. They hate them. So these new people will not give Hezbollah any chance to recover or something. So that's the situation now. We don't know what new dangers may come from these rebels and new militias in Syria, but the Hamas is taken out of the game so far. Now we have to deal with the Houthi, but altogether for Hamas it was a catastrophic war. So they lost everything, and they were sacrificed by Iran as powers they put into the game. It's interesting. One has to take into account that for fundamentalist Muslims, they don't see it like that. They see it as an honor to lose everything in such a war because it's a sacrifice for Allah, and so it's a complete different mentality. But for the normal population in Gaza, of course, it's a catastrophe, and I think of them every day. Now it's cold here, and we expect rain and so on. So it must be it must be terrible to live now in makeshift shelters and tents and ruins without window panes and so on, as most of them live now. So the Gaza infrastructure is widely destroyed, and the buildings and so on, so that many people have to suffer. They have backed this the Hamas at a certain degree. We don't know how much, but of course they were not. Their majority was not opposing. Let's take it like that. So, nevertheless, there are people, human beings, and you suffer with them when you think about the situation they are now in. But it was absolutely crushing what they provoked. So they cannot stand the answer. So the answer was devastating. And that's the situation now here, that Israel has done well in that war. We had a lot of victims ourselves, unusually high losses in, I think, more than 800 troops. And it's not over. I think just yesterday there were again 3 boys killed in Gaza still, where everything is booby trapped and full of bombs and other devices. So my grandsons told me they don't fight directly. They said they are cowards, but everything is booby trapped. So they changed the entire Gaza Strip, the entire territory, in one big booby-trapped area where you cannot exclude. Although our troops are very skilled dealing with that, and there are engineering troops and so on who check everything before they enter a building. They check what could happen. Nevertheless, you cannot avoid some incidents like I think it was an explosion yesterday with the 3 boys, and of course it's terrible to see that we have still victims after so long a time, but they could heap up, accumulate such an amount of stuff in the years we let them do that. I must say, I mean, we all have our share in that. We have to change our attitude also. So we cannot again let a bad American administration bring us into such a situation. I think that's what the politicians here have to learn. The harmony with the United States must has its limits. So when there is a bad administration, as we had, and I must say that the Biden administration, in all regards of the Middle East, was a catastrophe. So I cannot see any positive things they have done here. They let the Houthi do. We have the problems now with the Houthi, but it's also because Biden took them off the list of sanctions. That was one of the first things he did. It was very bad. And in the end, he had to put them on the list again. I mean, such a politics where you do one thing and then you have to revoke it. That was the Biden politics in the Middle East. It was completely without any conception. It was only, I don't know. Nobody really understands what they did here. But it was very, let's say, dilettante politic of unprofessional and with the wrong ideological premises. So I think that's the main point, that they had a completely wrong approach to the entire problems here. So, but we have to learn, the Israeli politicians have to learn that they cannot let them do. So they have to oppose American administration as far as possible. I cannot decide that. I know that we are dependent on the United States. That's sure. We cannot start a war here without the support of the United States. That's a situation. Israel is a tiny country with 10 million people. We did our best. The Israeli population suffered a lot. We sent all our children and grandchildren and so on into this war, and they fought. But we need the ammunition and the assistance of the United States. And we had the case here that the United States were completely incompetent at this moment, and that made this war so difficult and so much, let's say, procrastinated. It was like college students who always procrastinates to give his paper to the professor. So there are cases. So was it with these wars? They delayed and delayed. We knew already in 2012 that we had to act forcefully, but we didn't. And it was Obama time. So that was the problem, that the Israeli politicians gave in. And that has to stop. So that means that a lot of things here have to change also in Israel, the political attitudes. And so that we are now in the position that we have won the war so far, but we know that the work is not done. So we have to do a lot of work, a lot of aftermath work to do, and it will influence Israel for the next years, I'm sure.
Well, the decisions of the Biden administration, and some people have called this administration the third Obama term,
Yeah,
are based on wrong axioms and
yeah.
paradigms, of course, that always determine catastrophic results. It's again, I always say that all problems are conceptual problems. If we have a wrong image of what's going on, our decisions cannot be proper, cannot be rational. And that's exactly the problem or the issue, particularly in the West. We are not informed. We do not have a clear picture, except for a few
Mm, mm,
people that spend
mm,
their time
mm,
trying to learn,
mm, mm,
ignore the nonsense
mm,
coming from certain
mm,
academic departments, but the
mm,
majority is uninformed. And let's not forget the relationship that there is between public opinion and getting
mm,
elected. So this is
mm,
creating many of the issues that we are facing in Israel are also the byproduct of the disinformation of the public opinion and the politics that either disinforms them or goes along with it. I mean, we don't know because we are not in
mm.
the Department of State or at the Pentagon to see what's really behind these misinformed decisions.
I think we talked about this already, and it's also a point. I think in the paper we talk about my thesis about the Palestinian state as a senseless enterprise. Um, uh, I mentioned Obama's speech in Cairo 2009 as the beginning of this wrong Middle East politics of the United States. And if you read this speech, it was given at the Cairo University. Um, it couldn't be more wrong. So it's completely wrong what his ideas about the Middle East. He offered. So I must say that he presented that quite openly, so you could see what he intended to do, and they did. And they were completely wrong already in 2010. One year later, he was corrected insofar that the peoples here in the region, in several countries, started rebellions against their own governments and not against Israel, as he had predicted. He saw Israel as the main problem here in the region, but the own governments were the main problem for most of these peoples because they lived in poverty there and so on. And it started then with the revolts, with this Arab rebellion in 2010. That was already a sign that Obama's ideas about what would happen here were completely wrong. So, and they acted so insofar, yeah, the entire conception of a Palestinian state is now to rethink. I mean, that is built up the UN resolution 181 of 1947, of November 1947. There was a recommendation of the United States to found two states here in the territory, a Jewish one and an Arab one. This is the beginning of this conception of the Palestinian state. And when you read the documents of the United Nations, you see that it was a complete different reality from the reality today. So the situation in the United Nations were completely different, and the political situation here in the Middle East was completely different. So the entire thing has to be rethought. So with a strange with a strange, I must say, stupidity, the Western countries cling to that idea of the Palestinian, of the two states. I have to say that the Palestinians always rejected that idea, all Arab countries here around. So Israel followed suit. So the United States gave even a deadline and said these two states have to be founded within the year 1948, what Israel did. Whereas the Arab states reacted with war. They said that they didn't accept the separation plan of the United Nations to separate the territory and start with two states here. So they said they reject the idea of a Jewish state completely. They wouldn't accept that, and they started war in 1948. In 1949, there was in Rhodos in Greece, truce, where the situation was fixed. So there was an armistice line given, so that a part of it was declared under Arab rule. And in this time, Jordan occupied this part. Jordan occupied the West Bank, and Israel accepted that for a time, and the Arab states didn't give in. And it started the war in 67, so that they also lost the Jordan troops had to withdraw from the West Bank, and Israel took it over. So that is the situation, that these territories, Gaza and the West Bank, are still undeclared, so to speak. There are no states. They cannot. Nobody would accept them as a state. I mean, there are certain conditions to accept a territory as a state. There must be certain structures and so on given, and nothing of that happened. So they didn't do anything to prepare a statehood. And when you live here and know the people and talk to Palestinians every day, as we did, or in times of peace, at least now there is a closure and they are not allowed to come in. But in normal times, we see them every day. I know from many discussions with them, and I know from people in the West Bank living, Palestinian people, also influential people in opposition to this Palestinian Authority, they always say that that the majority of the Palestinians don't want that state, that they are not in the slightest interested in such a state that will be corrupt and terroristic and only a dangerous enterprise that starts new wars and will take money from other countries to found aggressive militias and so on. So people don't want such a state. What they want is Israeli citizenship. The problem, the majority, there are people who say 2/3 or even 70% or so would be happy to get Israeli citizenship tomorrow. So there is a certain part supporting Hamas and those groups. Of course, they get money for that. But the majority are people who only want to get work and to feed their children. The work they get is mostly from Israel. That's something that people in the West don't know. That most of the work they have is connected with Israel. 80% of the goods they get in the supermarkets and so on are from Israel. So from an economic point of view, the West Bank is a part of Israel already, not politically, but economically. So the currency they have is the Israeli shekel. They have no own post office. All that goes via Israel. Israel is the is the state they depend on, they get their goods from, they get their money from, and so on. And most of them would like to become Israeli citizens. So now here is a strong opposition among our population in Israel, because people fear that the demography of the country will change dramatically in the moment we take in 3 millions of Palestinians or 2 millions as Israeli citizens. At the point now, most of them are Jordanian, have Jordanian passports. That's also something that most people don't know. There isn't such a thing like a Palestinian a citizenship or something. It doesn't exist. They have Jordanian passports, also the family of Abbas and all these functionaries, because when the Jordanians occupied the territory between 1949 and 1967, they wanted to so they wanted to make it a part of Jordan. And that's why they made all Palestinians Jordanian subjects, the Jordanian king. And by the way, they forbade all Palestinian nationalist activities. They even forbade to mention the word Palestine. That came up only after the Jordanians had to leave the West Bank. So the Arab states oppressed that in the beginning. Now they are again at this point. It's very strange to observe. It's again that Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries forbid their citizens pro-Palestinian solidarity and pro-Palestinian activities. It's really forbidden in Saudi Arabia. And there are reports of human rights organizations that Saudi Arabian police really goes into the mosques and arrests preachers who try to call for solidarity with the Palestinian people. They do not allow this. That only happens in the West. The Arab states are fed up with the entire problem. The Jordan Crown Prince said in an interview with Washington-based medium Politico. I don't know whether you know it. It's
a very important political magazine.
Yeah, and he said in an interview with them that he, for his part, is not interested in the Palestinian state. He doesn't care. He said he doesn't care. But he fears that the populace in his country, population is that the young people and Saudi Arabia is like Israel, a very young country with the demography like Israel, with I think 40% under 20 or something as it is here. And he feared the reaction that they would hinder him to go and start relations with Israel. Then something strange happened. That has been half a year ago. But some months later, he corrected his statements because he got a feedback, obviously, from the young people in Saudi Arabia. And then he said altogether that he sees that also his population is not interested in the Palestinian state anymore because it only costs them money. And he said, as the future ruler of Saudi Arabia, I have to think about the future of my country. And the future of my country needs good relations with Israel. We have a lot of problems here. They have a lot of problems. They need water, and they need the problems that the region here has, how to fight desertification and so on. And he has a very good partner in Israel, in all these problems. And he said, what I have to think about is the future of my country, and the young people, obviously, in Saudi Arabia think alike. And then the Palestinians are completely out of consideration. They're not interesting anymore because they don't offer anything, only take money. They take money since decades. Saudi Arabia and the Sunni states pay a lot of money every year to support them, and they ask themselves why and what for. So they will not support the idea of a Palestinian state anymore. It will only cost more money. They think about themselves, and I think it's a very understandable and natural position for a government of an Arab country to think about their own future. And we have a lot of problems here that are related to the region, to the water and ecological situation and so on. And he knows that he has to think about that, and he tries to make Saudi Arabia independent on their monoculture based only on oil. They want to become a country that is producing more than crude oil, and that's why the situation has completely changed. All this happened during this war. So we are now in a situation where all a little bit dizzy because of that. It was too much. It was too much information, too much change to get in. I'm sitting here and I have the same problem as many people here, that all this happened so quickly within 1 year. The situation here in the Middle East has completely changed in any regard, and now we have to see what we do with that. And I mean, it's more or less what the younger people have to do. I'm a pensioner already and can say so. I'm very interested to see what my grandchildren think about it, and they have clear ideas. So but in favor of a Palestinian state is almost nobody. So also a very small majority of Israeli old left. So some old leftist people are still thinking it's a conditio sine qua non to found a Palestinian state. But I think 80% of Israelis, there are already a statistic about this. It's about 70 or 80% that say no, such a state doesn't make any sense. When we came to Israel, the left parties with their idea of the Palestinian statehood and the two states living side by side, Oslo and all that, was highly popular. So it has completely changed.
Yeah, because Israeli wants peace, and people that want peace, they are willing to every kind of compromise. Think of Chamberlain with Hitler. The problem is that you had to see and understand who's on the other side. And October 7, at least, which is amazing that Israeli had to go through that to understand, made them understand. Europeans, Westerns, they are in La La Land, and
they don't understand now.
they
But I think, I mean, they have terror attacks enough, and I see it also in Germany. You see there is that quite peaceful land of Saxonia-Anhalt, where this terror attack on some days ago in Magdeburg on the Christmas market, a Saudi, obviously mentally disturbed guy drove his car into the crowd and killed, I think, 5 people and injured 200. So all of these experience, I think they need it. It's cruel, but sometimes in history people learn only from terrible events. It's really like that. It's the same with us here.
There is another one in London, same thing. But if you just count from 9/11 until now, we have over 45,000 attacks in the West, where people have died, from Charlie Hebdo to the Bataclan to the concert in England. But once again, we go back to the key topic, at least for me. It's information, it's understanding, it's connecting the dots. Because you just have to look 3 months in the attacks in Europe, and you have way more people than those who have been killed in Magdeburg. I think it was Magdeburg, right?
Magdeburg, yeah.
And last month, President Biden, there's a famous picture that has been around on the media. I mean, online mostly, not the mainstream media, where he has been seen with a copy of a horrendous and revisionist book by a
Yeah.
undefinable academic. The title is
Mm.
"The 100 Years War on
Yeah,
Palestine."
I saw this photograph. Yeah. I
Yes.
saw this photograph. His Jewish daughter-in-law was with him in the picture, Mrs. Cohen, Mrs. Biden Cohen. So I thought it's interesting to see that obviously there are people who don't understand. You know, Biden has Jewish grandchildren and I think two Jewish daughters-in-law, and one of them was with him in the picture when he bought this stupid book where the entire problem is in a completely wrong understood. And obviously he reads that still. I mean, he doesn't count anymore. He goes out of office
No.
now. But yeah, I think you are right that a lot of people are ignorant.
Or
Yes,
brainwashed.
brainwashed, whatever, so different reasons, but in the end they don't understand. And but so we have to live with that. When I came to Israel 30 years ago, I got the impression that from year to year more, because we have to stand it here, we have to stand in for the existence of this state, that the atmosphere and the mental situation of the Israelis is the most crucial thing. So, and this has changed. So that's why many Israelis don't care so much anymore what people in Europe think and what people in the United States think. So whether this atmosphere, the general attitude changes or not over there, we found our point here now, what we have to do. And young Israeli people are quite sure that they have to act forcefully to defend the country, and they have no problem with that. So it's a complete different situation from 1994 when we came to that country. And it was on the height of the Oslo hysteria, and really believed that we could have a lasting peace with these people. I think that's now for the majority of Israelis clear, and for the young people anyway. And they are the majority here. Israel has a very interesting demography that we have. I have recently I saw numbers that 40% of Israeli are younger than 20 or 21, and 55% of Israelis are younger than 34. So 35. So the people up to 35 have mostly been in the war, and they saw with their own eyes what happens there, and they saw what Gaza means. And it is not only that they are aggressive against Israel, the cruelty starts with their own people. We published videos here in the Israeli newspapers that show Palestinians torturing Palestinians. So that's what happens there. The Hamas had a system of torture chambers and all over the Gaza Strip, and tortured and killed everyone who was not of their opinion. And that's all what Israeli people had to learn. And we have learned now that is a cruel, inhuman kind of rule, and we have to destroy it. There is no other possibility.
Don't worry, nobody in the West saw those images on mainstream videos. Nobody has
Right?
seen
Yeah, it's
any-
interesting. Yeah,
anything. It never happened in the West.
yeah.
Only happened. Okay, it just
Hmm.
it's very difficult to discuss the situation in the
Yeah,
West compared to the reality of Israel.
yeah.
It's very difficult because there is a
I say people who complain about the bad information in European or American media, that they can easily read in the internet Israeli newspapers with they are or have all an English edition. So every English speaker and I think that most of the people also in Europe can read the Israeli newspapers. And I will not say that they write always the truth and that they're 100% reliable, but of course they are much more reliable and much more informative about what happens here than all European media together. So we published it here in the media. So there was a lot of material to be seen and to read about what really happens in the Palestinian territories and so on. So that in the meantime, almost nobody here is interested in such a state, into consolidating that even a statehood, such a system. I mean, now it's open and you can, but in the moment you accept this as a kind of statehood, a system like that where people are tortured and where all these cruelties and corruption is all day life, then you cannot go back anymore. So I think that, but nevertheless, the Palestinian people don't want it. That's the most crucial point. That's also what I wrote in my article.
Yes.
If the Palestinian people would like to have such a state, it would be a problem. But it is a problem. It's not a problem anymore. It doesn't exist. The problem doesn't exist anymore. So that's what I see. It is only a kind of obsession in the mind of older European politicians. Let's wait what will the next generation deal with, and also in the United States. Trump has a complete different approach to that, I think, than the Biden administration had. And let us see what will happen during the next 4 years when there is a change in the United States, and there will also be changes in Europe. And here the change has already happened. So I think we're at a very interesting point now in history where really here in the Middle East, things will change. And they can only change for the better, by the way. So although it's hard at the moment with all the problems we have and with the war we had, and of course it caused a lot of damage also here. And as I told you, we are really a little bit exhausted now from all the exciting month with all the worries and so on. But we are at the same time very optimistic because the situation changes dramatically, visibly at the moment, and it will be for the better.
Well, that's we have to hold our breath for the next month until inauguration, and then we'll see. But I mean, it's difficult. That can, at least for the United States, will definitely not be possible to be worse than what we have right
No, yeah, it's the same. It's here. Yeah, right.
now.
I think
not possible.
it will become very interesting. I think that there will be a lot of experiments and new attempts to go new ways and so on. Not all will be successful. I think that's the way it is, but it will become interesting. I must say that these altogether 12 years Obama doctrine with Biden as a second part, then it has been a kind of stagnation in the thinking and so on. That's what you see also in the conception of a Palestinian state. People didn't think anymore about it. They repeated endlessly the same formulas from the UN recommendation of 1947, although the situation had completely changed. And that's what is interesting now to see. There will be changes now, and after so many years of blocking the developments, and that's what Obama in reality was. It was a kind of, in my eyes, reactionary stagnation politics. So he blocked a lot of things that could have set into motion. And now we will see what happens now.
Well, repeating the mantra of the 1947 United Nations
Yeah.
orders, it's like if you want to apply that to European history, now repeating that Germany should get its borders, the border Germany had before the Second World War.
Yes, of course. It
The
is like something like
territory they
that. Yeah.
lost was because they attacked Israel. So
Yeah.
it didn't make much sense in the beginning to give back the Sinai Desert, etc. It didn't make much sense. But that we can repeat, okay, yeah, they attacked, but they can keep the territory they lost. It's not the way it works. Otherwise, we will start saying that Germany needs to have Danzig back.
Yeah. Of
It doesn't
course.
make
Yeah.
sense. Doesn't make sense. But you see, the point is that this is something that objectively make no
Yeah.
sense, but it's also a taboo to be discussed
Yeah.
in mainstream media. And again, once
Yeah.
again, the problem is always there. Is a
I think all this. I think all this will change. I was very surprised when I sent this article we speak about where I stated that the Palestinian state is out of possibility at the moment and it doesn't make any sense anymore and so on. I sent it to the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, and I was sure they would not publish it. I couldn't imagine such a publication. I send it. I do that sometimes. I send articles to editors and know that they will not publish it. But for me, it's some fun to see how they react. And in this case, I was completely stunned when I got an answer very quickly within the same day or so that you wrote, yeah, that's very interesting. And you write about a lot of things people here don't know in Switzerland. So we will publish that. And because the Neue Zürcher Zeitung was one of the most, I must say, prestigious and influential newspapers in,
liberal.
in, in Europe,
Yes.
I was really surprised that they wanted to publish it. That was for me a great. I still have the article here. I will show you. It's for me. It's such an important thing that I put it into plastic to have it on my desk to see that it came really true. I've waited so many years that I could publish something like that. And of course, it was always rejected. I cannot tell you how often I got letters of rejection because I made some suggestion to publish something like that. So, but now it happens. And the reaction, as I told you, of the 50% of the 300 letters were positive. That was the next point that was absolutely stunning. I'd never thought something like that. And that gave me personally the feeling that things are coming into motion at the moment. So that really things are changing. And then younger people, also younger editors. So it will not. I think we have passed the deepest point. We have passed already, and now it goes up. I'm quite sure.
We'll see. We'll see. But by right now we are close to the end year, so I can wish you a happy new year, and for you and your family. And hopefully, we'll talk again after the inauguration when we will see confirmed all our best wishes.
Very good. Yeah, I reciprocate your wishes to you and your family. All the best. It was a pleasure to talk to you during the war. We had several sessions like that, and I think it was always interesting. And for me, it was a very good occasion to formulate and to think something I wouldn't do alone. It's always better to be in a dialogue, and I'm quite happy that we start with that. And so let's continue now in better times.
Now in better times. So,
Okay,
Toi
all best. Yeah,
Hanukkah Sameach,
Chanukah Sameach
and
and a
Happy New
happy
Year.
new year.
Bye
Okay.
bye.